It's really interesting that you'd be in a position where you're not necessarily living the life you want to live, but living the life that you don't want to live is more acceptable to you than doing whatever it takes to change your life. And there's a really simple reason for that. You want, above anything else, you want to maintain your identity, right? So the process of changing your life to becoming the person that you're supposed to be means that you have to let go of the person you are right now, or at least you have to let go of the person that you think you are. So we have all these narratives in our head. We have stories in our head. We have stories in our head about who we are. We have stories in our head about the way that the world works. We have stories in our head about our role in the way the world works. And in order to make that change, you're going to have to shatter a lot of the illusions in your mind that you have about yourself. You're going to have to, in many ways, shatter the illusions of the way that you see the world, period. And that is a lot to ask of someone, right? It's a lot to ask of someone to change their entire worldview and to admit that for however long they've been living their life, they have been using narratives that aren't fulfilling. They have been essentially mismanaging their life and telling themselves lies that are keeping them stuck. So if you're going to really make the change you need to make in your life and become that person that you know you really could be and should be, you will have to go through, somewhat of a psychologically painful process, but in the end, you'll end up better. So let's go through some ways to kind of make this transition between who you think you are right now and the person that you're really supposed to be. So one of the big things that is really challenging for people when they're trying to level up is this idea of having to actually figure out whether or not you're cut out for what you want to do, right? So we get into this mode where we're constantly daydreaming about what our life would be like if we leveled up, right? I call this Potentialville. So we live in Potentialville in our minds. We see ourselves doing all these amazing things, having these amazing accomplishments. And it makes us feel good because we at least can, even if we're not actually doing those things, it gives us a sense that it is something that we could do, but we're just holding back. So we get to have that little coping mechanism in our mind. But oftentimes, if you go out and try to accomplish some of those things in the real world, you are going to get feedback on that. And a lot of that feedback, especially when you're in the beginning, is going to tell you that you aren't as good as you thought you were. That there are things that you could try and still fail. There are things that you can bump up against that might be outside of your capabilities, right? And it's hard to face that. It's better to live in this idea of, thinking, it's really weird. We have this mental movie in our mind, like in the real world, we're not necessarily doing the things that we're supposed to be doing 100% of the time, right? But in our mind, we have this mental movie of, how amazing we are, how awesome we are, how we could do X, Y, and Z, but we're just not. But you got to let go of that, and you have to actually try to do some of those things in the real world. Don't daydream about starting a business. Actually go out there and try to start it. Actually go out there and try to sell something to somebody. Actually get told no. Actually go through product launches where you made 0 sales. That was one thing that happened to me. One time I tried to launch a product I thought it was going to go well. I had 0 sales. Crushed my ego. Made me want to quit. But then after that, I realized that it didn't kill me, and I went on to create more successful products and things like that. So getting out of my shell and just thinking about launching, or getting out of my shell and actually launching versus thinking about launching, is what made that difference. I had to face that harsh reality in order to move on. So you have to let go of this idea of your potential. Your potential doesn't matter. Only the things that you do and put out in the real world are the things that actually matter. And another thing you need to let go of in terms of who you think you are versus who you could be is, a lot of us create these narratives in our head about ourselves to cope, right? We tell ourselves that, we build a complex around our flaws. We build a complex around some of the things that we think are getting in the way. When in reality, we could choose to be someone different. We could choose to enact different behaviors, but we're just not willing to do it, right? So you might have all sorts of stories in your head that tell you that you're not capable of doing what you need to do. Maybe you tell yourself you're not talented enough. You're not naturally gifted enough in certain areas. You don't have enough intelligence. You don't have the right network, right? You're weaving this story together about who you are right now and about what you're capable of doing, and you do that to basically avoid one simple fact. And you do it to avoid the fact that you could change who you are. You could be doing those things, but you're just not willing to do it. You just don't want to go through whatever emotional and psychological challenges that are necessary to get you to that end, right? So if you say, for example, they might develop a victim's mentality, right? They might tell themselves that they can't succeed for X, Y, and Z reason because they're subject to all of this oppression from society, or they're subject to oppression from their employers, or they think people are out to get them, all sorts of reasons, right? When in reality, it's just a story that they're making up in their head. When you look at yourself as a victim, when you look at yourself as someone who is subject to the whims of the world, of course you're not going to change. But it's still kind of a weirdly comforting story that people will tell themselves to avoid doing what's necessary. And I could go on and talk about a whole lot of different examples like this, but everyone tells themselves something to make them feel better and to make them avoid the reality that they could just instantly decide to behave differently right away. So it's a little bit difficult of a challenge to solve, but you have to figure out what is going to matter more to you in the long run. Like, would you rather preserve your ego, preserve your sense of who you are, preserve these stories and these copes you tell yourself, or would you rather go through the fire and do what it takes to change? And in this next section, I'm going to talk about really kind of the essence of what it's going to take for you to make that personal transformation and why it's so hard. And the process of letting go of who you are to become who you need to be, you have to go through a lot of things that are going to deteriorate you. You're going to have to go through a lot of things that deplete you. You're going to have to go through a lot of situations that are going to shatter your ego. You're going to have to go through a lot of situations that are temporarily going to lower your self-esteem. You're going to have to go through embarrassments. You're going to have to go through rejections. You're going to have to go through feeling like you're not cut out for something. You're going to have to go through questioning yourself. You're going to have to go through feeling like you want to quit. You're going to have to go through wondering why the heck you're doing this at all. You're going to have to go through that process where, right before you get what you really want, right before you get to the moments where you start to win, those are the moments where you're going to feel at your lowest. Those are the moments where you're going to feel depleted, deteriorated. Those are the moments where you're going to feel like, your back is going to be against the wall, right? And it's, to be honest, it may or may not be worth going through for you. And you have to decide. I feel like people should make one decision one way or another. I feel like some people should just fully resign themselves to their situations and, just continue lying to themselves for the rest of their lives and just being okay with that. Or you got to go through the fire. Or you got to go through that situation where for a while you are just going to get beat up to shreds, but you're going to come out of it a lot stronger. Whereas most of us, we're in this limbo, right? We daydream a little bit, and we kind of feel like we want to make that change, but we still are coping with our stories. We're never quite either or, We're always living in that tension in the middle. So for you, if you're watching this video, odds are you're leaning more towards wanting to go through that fire, wanting to go through that difficult emotional, spiritual, physical process that it's going to take to become someone better, to become someone different. So, it's never going to get easier to do that. There's never going to be an amount of thinking that's going to make you more courageous to do whatever it is that you need to do. Each day that passes is just another day where you're closer to dying. It's just another day where you're closer to having less time to be that person. So, I put these videos together because I want you to get to that point where you're just like, F it, like I'm going to start doing this today. And it's kind of like you're just you're at the edge of the pool. You don't want to dive in. You don't want to dive in. You don't want to dive in. You dive in and the water's really cold and you want to get out of the pool, but then eventually you settle in and you're in the pool and you're ready to navigate. So that's kind of the way it works. So yeah, you got to let go. You got to let go of who you think you are right now to become the person you're supposed to be. And I've always, there's this quote that I really love. And it says, someone once told me the definition of hell. And the definition of hell is when the person you were supposed to become meets the person that you actually did become, right? So imagine what your same DNA. You look the same, everything about you is the same, except your attitude is different, except you're free of fear, except you're more certain about everything in your life. Like imagine what that person would go on to do. That's the person that you're supposed to be, but you can't just flip a switch and become that person. You have to go through the fire. You have to face the dragon. You have to rise up to the challenge. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to suck. In the beginning, it's going to suck, but in the end, you can come out of the other side fully transformed. And after you've been broken down and put back together, you're going to be stronger than ever. Part of the reason I put together this book was to help you make that transformation. So this is something you should check out. It's called Real Help: An Honest Guide to Self-Improvement. If you're on YouTube, that's something you can check out in the description below. If you're on Instagram, the link is in the bio. Make sure you're checking that out so you can get those brutal realizations that you need to change your life. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure that you are engaging with the video on whatever platform you're watching it on. Hopefully you watch a couple other videos on the channel on my various platforms, and I will see you on the next video.